we've been involved in quite a lot of large mixed-use developments, and we were particularly interested to see how they can be integrated into the inner city areas. And we obviously our company originates from the UK. We used to kind of a very dense city, but low scale, nice streetscape, very human scale sort of cities, and particularly in European cities, to find places for these expansions to happen is not easy. Traffic, transport is a big challenge with integrating new developments in the cities, and finding space for them is always a great challenge. And we feel that the way these projects are integrated in our cities is really key. How do they add actually to the quality of the city, and how do we experience them as pedestrians and as people who live in these cities? And I want to refer to one project to start with in the UK, which is not actually our project, but it is a good example for how expansion in the city can happen. What I'm looking at here in particular is kind of new CBD type developments, large mixed-use developments which get inserted into the inner core of the city. One aspect which we believe is very important is for the cities to stay legible and to understand how cities are connected with each other. Many of us, they travel in cities with metros and MTR systems, and that really means we lose the overview. We go around the cities underground. We don't really know from which place to which place we're moving, and that results in a sort of a confusion of the core of the cities. London, despite of what people might perceive it to be, it's actually been it is layered in some ways, and it has grown from the center, and then more and more layers were added on. And there's been a discussion for many years now of how new growth can be accommodated in the city. One of the projects we've looked at is the Thames Gateway, it's called, the estuary of the Thames. This is actually brown land at the moment, and there are opportunities for growth in this zone. And that is obviously a model of allowing the growth to spread into the urban areas. But I'm more interested in how we actually find ways to grow the city in the downtown areas. This morning, when I replaced the PowerPoint presentation, I said last time when I gave a presentation, I replaced it, and I ended up with the old presentation on the screen, and it's exactly what happened today again. So I think I can still continue though, but I don't really want to go too much into these aspects. So in the inner city area in London, the main opportunities for development is really around the docks. There were a whole number of docks along the Thames. They were normally sort of perpendicular relative to alignment of the Thames, and these areas are now not used anymore, so that's where new developments can occur. And one of the most significant developments was Canary Wharf, which was done in the early 90s. And what's interesting about this development is we're talking about 1.5 million square meter of development in an area which today is considered to be very central, but when it was built, it was actually slightly on the periphery, a little bit more towards the estuary. And it didn't have any public transport connectivity, and it was purely commercial use. And what that meant is that the people were actually not prepared to go there and rent the office space. And in fact, the developer went bankrupt. And the project was conceived to be not successful. Also, the development kind of turned its back to the hinterland. There's very nice waterways in the hinterland, Isle of Dog. It has great opportunities, but Canary Wharf didn't really embrace them. And for us, really, when we came to Hong Kong, we had to develop a new perspective of what density is and what Asian city life is like. I mean, you've heard the presentation just now about Singapore, but Hong Kong is a little bit different. You can see Hong Kong and London are actually quite similar in certain aspects. They have about the same population and they have about the same land take. But London, the development is scattered over the whole territory of London, whilst in Hong Kong, because of its terrain and the mountains and the hinterland, the development is really restricted to the areas along the coast. So very dense developments along the coast and no development in the mountains. And obviously, these dense developments result in very different building models. You can see that here, how the city has developed along the waterfront. And then another aspect of Hong Kong life was that, so the very dense developments along the waterfront, but when you go outside the city, 5 minutes maybe away from the city center, and you are in very lush landscape. You've got about 75% of area in Hong Kong is national parks. And another aspect which particularly the developers were particularly fond of is that Hong Kong had the opportunity to expand. Layers and layers of reclamation were added on over the years, and that gave great opportunities. You could develop the waterfront. You can sell your apartment blocks with sea views. You have very high value development. And then what you do is you put another zone of coastline in front of that, and you start the process all over again. You start generating a lot of very profitable developments that way, even though the people who are living further behind from the waterfront are a little bit challenged each time a new layer gets added. But on the other hand, this very dense development on either side of the channel in Hong Kong doesn't really allow for much growth. So reclamation was the only opportunity. And one area I want to look at here in particular is the West Kowloon Cultural District, the West Kowloon Peninsula. With the new airport, Hong Kong decided that they needed a new airport railway link which connects all the way to the downtown area. And because there wasn't any space for this new railway interface to be placed, a very large reclamation was generated, and the station was going to be in the heart of that, and this Hong Kong model was explored to its extreme, I would say, where the transport was integrated with the urban development around it. You can see here that's the current configuration of the peninsula. So there's a whole number of transport facilities which go into this piece of reclamation. Some of them have now been completed. Those two, and the center one is still under construction. You can see a slightly more detailed view of the peninsula here. And the project we got involved in first when we came to Hong Kong was Kowloon Development, which is the development over the top of the railway station. And the intention was, when this development was created, that there was a vision that the reclamation would be extended and another large piece of land would actually be reclaimed. This was called the Kowloon Point reclamation. And the intention was that all of this would become a new CBD for Hong Kong. And in Central, where the densities were very high densities were first achieved, there was a recognition that there were other opportunities which offered themselves to the developers. Because the towers became quite close to each other, a huge pedestrian network was inserted where you can connect from one building to the next. And Hong Kong is a very controlled and regulated space in a certain way. This idea of segregating pedestrians and segregating vehicular traffic from each other and having this kind of layered system, that was very close to the government's mind. They liked this idea of central, how these various layers are created and how the whole ground level essentially is given over to vehicular circulation. And this was going to become the model for the West Kowloon Peninsula. with Kowloon development being the first piece in this development. One of the drivers you can see here was that the MTR, who were the joint developers for this master plan, they realized that the fare income, shown here in blue, would over a longer period of time not sustain the operation or would not be profitable. So the development, actually, you can see after 95, I think, the development became the very lucrative asset for MTR, and they realized that that was the way to create sustainable public transport. When we started with the project, the old airport was still in operation, and there was a height limit still imposed onto this particular site. And we had to accommodate this 1.1 million square meter of development on a very small, in a relatively small piece of land, and it resulted in great densities. And these were sort of the first iterations of the master plan. And then when the height limit got relaxed, the idea of this super high-rise tower in the corner of the development was born, and that tower also went through a number of iterations. I mentioned this idea of the layering. The layering here in this whole district was meant to be taken very literal. In other words, the ground level was now going to be used only by transport, essentially. So buses, taxis, all kind of vehicles, street-based vehicles were going to be at the streets, and the retail components were lifted above the street level, and they would connect to the adjacent sites, and they would become the main pedestrian network. And then the public open space is placed on top, and this public open space is really serving as a community space for all the towers over the top. Obviously, fairly complex project with some very complicated phasing issues and integration issues between the different parcels that all had to be designed on a master planning level. The project, when we started it, it was set out to take 14 years, and it seemed to take very long. There were instances where the progress seemed to be quite slow, but actually, overall, it was completed in 12 years' time. So the whole development was conceived within the original program, and this is now the final outcome of the development. So this idea of this reclamation became a very sensitive issue, because people wanted to take charge of the harbor front. They didn't really like the idea of giving over the harbor front to the developers all the time, and didn't like the idea of losing all their views and their aspects. So the reclamation became sensitive. There was essentially put a stop on reclamation, and that changed the whole master planning approach for this peninsula. This piece of land was now always going to remain sea. But nevertheless, the high-speed railway station is being currently developed next to the Kowloon development. And again, property development will be put on top of that. And then, as a recognition for trying to create a permanent edge for the harbor, the cultural district is now being developed in front of these railway networks. Now, whilst Kowloon was being conceived, Canary Wharf underwent a number of changes. The first very big, significant change to Canary Wharf was that a metro system was introduced. And with the metro system, the people had access to the development, and it started to become more of a destination. And also the idea of mixed use was introduced. There was retail introduced in the bottom of the towers. The development was more integrated into the neighborhood, and actually it started to turn into a very successful model for a new CBD, for inner city growth. So this kind of comparison between the two schemes was something which we drew from as a lesson. The mixed-use nature of these very dense developments and the integration with transport, we feel, are key. And having done a fairly dense development in Hong Kong, the plot ratio of Kowloon development is about 12. We thought we had kind of reached the capacity. We didn't think that you could go much denser than that, but we were wrong. we were asked to develop a scheme in Shenzhen, just across the border from Hong Kong. This was the site when we went to visit it in 2002. There were all these tenement houses. And this site was, the developer had this vision to redevelop this site. Some of the shots of the neighborhood. And his approach was very interesting. He felt that rather than to relocate the villagers, he wanted to create a model where the villagers are embraced in this new development concept. He founded a company with the villagers, and he obviously was given the land to be developed, but he offered the villagers one flat to own. Each of the villagers got one flat, and they also had these flats were accommodated in this component. They also had each villager was given 2 rental flats. Flats to rent out, so that was their livelihood, and also the commercial space was provided. This was the submission which was made to the planning bureau, and that was really the starting point for our design. The podium, there was a retail podium to connect to these towers, and the only 2 components which the developer could take charge of were the tower and the retail component, and to make this commercially viable, he had to build a fairly large, tall tower. Most of the villagers were happy with this model. This was in 2003, 2004. The future of property prices and so on was obviously not known, but there was one in particular, a Hong Kong owner, which was holding out. He didn't think that was the right way to go. Eventually he was bought out, and he didn't join into the scheme. We then started to develop a master plan around the planning guidelines. We placed the resettlement buildings so that they had views of the park. The rental flats still have view lines out into the park, and there's actually an opera house in this zone here. These are the 2 commercial buildings, also as part of the resettlement, and they're all arranged around the crescent-type retail space in the middle. And the tower, we saw the tower. There's some water lake in the park. We saw that we were inspired by sort of a fountain. We wanted to have that skin of the building wrapping over the top of the tower. The retail component, this idea of fluidity, we also took this into the facade of the retail. One really critical aspect with this development, it is right in the center of Lo Wu, of the old central business district, and to be able to make this sustainable in terms of traffic which would be generated by this development, it was absolutely crucial that this building had a connection to the metro system. So this connectivity to public transport is also another critical aspect. And in Kowloon, as I explained, we had adopted this layering principle, and there's a big bus station below the retail component, and the ground level is really handed over primarily to transport, and we felt that was a shortcoming of a Kowloon development. We wanted to create. We felt that even with going to plot ratios, here we're going to plot ratios nearly 15. With these kind of plot ratios, we could still create very positive integration with the neighborhood and with the street level. And the podium and the retail spilling out onto the pavement gave us those opportunities. There's a retail entrance, and this is actually quite an active little zone now within the district. And here you can see the retail. The retail itself acts as a connector to all the developments and also to the tower. Maybe talking a little more about the tower. The tower, we went a little bit against general principles. Normally, super high-rise, this tower is 450 meters tall, nearly, 100 stories. Normally, super high-rise towers like that are based on more or less square footprints, and that is because that helps them to resist the wind loads best. But we are looking out with this tower to Hong Kong. We're overlooking the marshes. You get fantastic views from the tower, and we felt that we wanted to have a wider south elevation and north elevation and narrower east and west elevations, and that generated a more blade-like appearance of the tower. And this skin we wrapped over the top, we opened it up at the bottom, and that's what generated the main entrance into the office component. We also feel that circulation within the tower should be simple and clear. We went for only one transfer floor for the office component. These are shuttle lifts, double-height shuttle lifts, which take you up to halfway up the office component. And then we have a number of lift zones which are served both from the metro level as well as from ground level. So there's a repeat there in the lower half of the office component and the upper half of the office component. In Hong Kong, public viewing decks are not so popular. The main reason, I believe, is that actually you need space at ground. You need queuing space. You need other provisions at ground level. They're often not available. Also, the tower gets slightly less efficient if you integrate extra lifts to just cater for the viewing deck. But we still wanted to create at least a semi-public space at the top. And our approach was to put the hotel lobby at the very top of the tower, a little bit, I guess, to similar to what you have in some of the towers here. And that was going to become the space where you have some restaurants and some public functions. So the hotel doubles up as a semi-public space. And St. Regent's moved into the tower. This is the atrium at the top where the hotel rooms are entered from. You can see here some of the views out to the marshes, so very, very open views into the mountains, into Hong Kong. And this particular image, I think you can see the slenderness of the tower. We've got 1 in 9 slenderness ratio for this tower here, which is for a tall building like that. Required some special approval processes. We had Arabs to help us with that. It was a bit challenging because the interstory drift was quite high. And then we took this idea, obviously, of creating new CBDs was explored in other parts of China, Beijing being one example. This high-speed railway network I've mentioned before, this station in Hong Kong, actually ultimately connects to this station in Beijing. In Beijing, the MOR is very concerned about having a lot of people using their stations, and they don't like the idea of integrating stations with property development. They want to have a certain level of segregation. So the stations are really serving primarily only the passengers. But we, when we competed for this station, proposed that the master plan, at least, could be redeveloped and new opportunities could be created for developments, and the station being kind of the generator for this. Shortly after we've completed the station, Beijing also, like a lot of the cities in China now, realized that they needed an extension to their CBD, and they created a new mini CBD where you have a whole number of towers placed in a sort of quite close to the center of Beijing. And some of the aspects we've looked at, again, learning from London and from Hong Kong, is connectivity. How do we connect this new CBD to the city? There were actually stations close by, but there were no real provisions in the concept scheme for how the connection should happen. So we've looked at that, and we've been trying to improve this connectivity. There are also some plans for elevated neighborhood systems. And this was what we had proposed. We wanted to connect the towers below ground at least. There was a vision that these would all become headquarter buildings and therefore not a lot of opportunity for retail. But we created this below ground network and also made sure that MTR connectivity is achieved. we're competing for a whole number of these towers, including Z15, and we were quite fortunate that we won actually 5 out of the 9 entries we've made. We won the first prize, and Z15 will be the new landmark tower in Beijing. I need to finish here. Unfortunately, the presentation got a little bit mixed up, so that means I couldn't really go through all the material I wanted to. I wanted to actually explain how this can apply to Shanghai. We've got here in Pudong, obviously, a lot of high-rise towers, but the density is actually quite low. We only talk about a plot ratio of about 5 in Pudong, and there are certain lessons we can also learn from that. So I will just flick through this here quickly. Yeah, so we've been looking at ways for how new urban centers can be created in the cities, and had the opportunity to work on a number of different proposals, and I wanted to share some of that experience and thoughts with you. Thank you very much.